Hi, I'm Sarah Gabriel, former special education teacher turned social entrepreneur and founder of In Good Company. We help businesses build thriving teams by giving them the confidence and tools to effectively lead employees with disabilities. This podcast is for leaders creating interability workplaces. Together, we'll dig into what it takes to lead with both heart and business savvy and build workplaces where contributors of all abilities are not just included, but essential. Welcome to In Good Company. Today, we are joined by Jacob Blaeser, the president of Ventures ATL, a nonprofit organization based in Atlanta that provides meaningful and sustainable employment to qualified adults with autism or developmental differences. Jacob's leadership has been instrumental in aligning the unique strengths of neurodiverse individuals with the operational needs of businesses, offering services such as data management and product fulfillment. His work has not only created valuable career paths for adults with autism, but has also demonstrated the tangible business benefits of inclusive employment practices. And if you're in business looking to partner with Ventures ATL, you can certainly reach out to them after today. We will have information at the end of the show and in the show notes so that you can do business with Ventures ATL.
Fantastic.
Jacob, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
You actually made the hike over to the Scheller College of Business, which is where we're recording.
Yeah, back to stomping grounds.
We're both alumni here.
Yeah.
Go Jackets.
Great to be back. Go Jackets.
Yeah, and I think that's how we originally connected. We're both in the disability space.
So our circles kind of overlapped initially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell us how you came to be the president of Ventures ATL.
Yeah.
Starting with how you connected with your co-founders.
Sure.
What was your connection to the disability community and the problem at hand?
Yeah, kind of maybe atypical for most people within this space. I have no direct connection. I don't have an immediate family member, in other words, that's part of this community. I have a really, really close friend though named Marnie Harris, who her whole thing is employment within the neurodiverse space. And
we share that friend as well.
Yeah, what a gem, right?
Yeah.
I was coming out of my first job out of tech, which was in consulting, and learned a ton, was ready for something new, and was thinking about what was next. And Marnie connected me to two of our co-founders and now board members, Chet Hurwitz and Sarah Barron, who were ideating and wanting to do something in this space. They have a son, David, that's on the spectrum, and had a firsthand view into all of the hurdles and challenges society faces for this population. And so Marnie connected us thinking, hey, maybe there's something here. They were thinking about starting a business, and Ventures ATL was just in its infancy and sort of being conceptualized. And so Chet and I met actually at the Barnes & Noble below us on the day before Thanksgiving in 2016. And at the time, I thought, wow, really great guy, really ambitious, wants to do something really cool. Wasn't quite clear yet what Ventures ATL was, but there had a lot of momentum moving towards it, and thought, I'm definitely not the person for it because, again, I don't have that direct connection. And we kept the conversation going. And over the next, call it 4, 5, 6 months, we had a couple more talks. And I started to realize, hey, even though I don't have a direct connection, I think this could be something I could add a lot of value to. And it's a need that is so far at least been drastically underaddressed. And as an extra anecdote too, when I was at tech, I spent a lot of time with homeless populations around campus. And one of the big reasons why is I've always found it really important, exciting, and also meaningful to bridge connections between communities that typically don't have interactions as much. And I saw that firsthand, as I'm sure you have as well, at tech with all the people around us. And graduating tech and then going into consulting, that aspect of my life kind of dwindled away, just location, time, etc. And so with a new perspective, I thought working with the neurodiverse community in a way is kind of like that, and that you have this bridge that you're connecting two different parts of society that typically have had some sort of disconnect or misunderstanding, etc. And so I ended up starting with Ventures ATL in April of 2017. And we've been off to the races, so to speak, ever since.
I love that. And I totally agree with you on the idea that groups in society just don't always have a natural reason to overlap and interact. Right. Historically, we know that the disability community has been physically separated in many ways and not included in our workforce. And so when I interact with an employer who's resistant or not quite sure if this can be done, I think a lot of the times it's just because you don't know what you haven't seen. And it's not an intentional exclusion. It's just, I've never seen it. I've never even thought to consider it.
Yeah, it's out of sight, out of mind. It's
literally out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
Yeah. So when we have business models like yours, which we'll get into, it is such a wonderful way when the business community can have this new opportunity to see the the full capabilities
Cool.
of what can be contributed
Right.
from this group that's previously not been able to fully contribute.
Exactly.
To contribute.
Exactly.
So tell us more about Ventures ATL.
Mm-hmm.
What's the model from the beginning? Has it changed? Has it pretty much stayed true to the North Star?
Sure.
Have you had some pivots? But
Yeah.
all that starting at the very beginning.
Great questions. The North Star that we're trying to solve is the unemployment rate within this community. Neurodiversity at large, in particular, especially within the autism community, but also adjacent aspects as well. There's an unemployment rate commonly cited at 80%, kind of depends on who you ask, but I think the underlying metric is that it's very large. And so whether it's 80 or 60, it's very large.
It's there.
It's there, yeah. And this statistic exists despite most of the folks within this community having a strong desire to work and skills that are valued in the marketplace. And so as we started Ventures ATL, we looked across people that were doing great things already to try to adhere or try to fix this metric. And what we saw was there were some really strong, well-intentioned efforts, but there hadn't yet been something that was scalable to a point that was making a substantive dent in this unemployment rate. And so instead of doing what was traditionally done thus far, which was a placement model, where, in other words, put simply, you have an agency that finds people that need work, and then they find companies that could utilize extra talent, and they'll connect them. Well-intentioned, it just, for a variety of reasons we can go into perhaps later in the conversation, podcast, it just isn't really scalable. Well-intentioned, just not scalable. And so we have a different model. Instead, we're the direct employer. So our employees work for us in our office, they're paid by us, and then we utilize their unique skill sets and provide professional services to corporate clients. So we're a third-party service provider, just like a company would hire someone to do consulting or accounting or law services, et cetera. They would hire Ventures ATL to do largely data-centric work, but also business process adjacent or outsourcing work. Sometimes it's called BPO. And what's really cool is that the secret sauce of what we do is the very things that define and often qualify our employees are what enable them to be atypically qualified and skilled at the work we do. And so it's a great story of what we're doing, employing adults within the special needs community, neurodiverse community. But the reason our clients work with us is because the value is so high. They're getting an outstanding value in working with us. It's cost effective. And then the cherry on top is, oh yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah. Yeah. And I commend every single business with a mission similar to yours who has a high standard for excellence. You're competitive when you're seeking out clients, keeping clients. You need to have competitive pricing. You need to have excellent service so they trust you. Sometimes I would imagine with sensitive information.
Absolutely.
So how do you go about training your staff members to uphold that excellence and feel confident going out and kind of speaking on your team's behalf when you're acquiring new clients?
Yeah, a couple things. We have a fantastic group of employees that care immensely about their work. Underlying, if I just say one data point for why we can do stuff like that, is because our employees care. They take their job seriously. They're professional. It matters to them. They come in every day, and the best part of their day, and we ask them this frequently, what's your favorite part about your career, about your job here at Ventures ATL, is that they can do work that's meaningful for clients. So knowing that, they take it seriously. It's obviously energizing to come into work because oftentimes you'll go into an office place, and I have friends a lot that are like, hey, what's the high and the low of your weekend? A low is often work. What's so cool about Ventures ATL is you go in and our employees consistently, the best part of their week is coming into work and being able to do work that matters. Other data points, other aspects that allow us to do this high quality work too, is we're very particular when we're scoping projects to make sure that it's something that we can add value for. We've said, this isn't necessarily a point of pride, I think it's just a helpful illuminating point, that we've said no to more engagements than yes to, even if they're well-intentioned and people that want to work with us, because a variety of reasons, largely we just don't think it's a good fit. And so we want to make sure we're setting the engagement up for success, setting our employees up for success as well. And we also have a great management team. We have a lean but talented management team that scopes projects in a way that accentuates our employees' skill sets and helps them navigate around, or helps a project navigate around aspects that might not be their fortes, but frankly don't really matter for the work to be done. And typically those hurdles or those friction points are things that have caused that unemployment rate to be so high in the past. And so it's amazing to watch the management team be able to coach, to teach, to lead our team in such a way that allows them to really shine.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of scaffolding that goes along with that. You probably take some projects that you're a great fit for, obviously, like you just said, but there's probably some opportunities for growing skills and stretching them a bit further.
Sure.
Do you have an example of what you were just talking about, but if you could give a little bit more specifics to it? What's an example of maybe a client that came to you and how did you assess the fit? What did that look like?
So I'll brag on the team a little bit. So we're working with Cox as an example, Cox Communications, and they came to us. I'll keep it to save time, kind of at a higher level, can double click if helpful. But they have a data governance team that's great. And they have a backlog of changes, in short, that need to be made to their CRM. And they just didn't have the bandwidth to adhere to all of these changes that needed to be done within their CRM as customer relationship management. So our team was brought on by Cox to help attend to this backlog and basically help it go away because it was slowing down the Cox team. And what was great is we worked through it really quickly and really accurately. And then the Cox team basically said, hey, you're doing great at eliminating this backlog. Do you think you could help us on the front end where we don't really have the issues to begin with? And so then our team took on more responsibility within that data governance practice of Cox and helped proactively prevent issues arising in their CRM. And then what's really cool is now it's extended to a point where our team is engaging directly with Cox associates. So they have a bunch of sales reps that are out across the country that are having questions about how to attend to something in the CRM, how to change something, or this is causing an error. What do we do here? And our team is directly engaging with them. Another aspect of it too is our employees are directly leading a call with the Cox data governance team. So a lot of times with clients, our management team is the one that interacts directly with the client. But sometimes it makes more sense for our employees that are more in the weeds and can speak to specific details to engage with them. And so Cox has been great because they've allowed us to set up a weekly meeting, and we get comments all the time about how productive and efficient the meetings are, which you can't take for granted meetings to be productive and efficient always. But it's been really great to see them. And they were visiting us recently, and they mentioned a really cool aspect that we shared with our team that often now the Cox leadership will use example responses, emails from our team as teaching tape, so to speak, to train new hires within Cox. And so that aspect of how do you ensure the quality, et cetera, of the work, I think it's kind of cool to just point to the fact that one of our clients is now using the work that we do as teaching tape for their folks.
What a testimonial. Were there any skills that your management stepped in to equip your employees with to rise to that occasion? Some of it sounds like it comes naturally, the tendency to be efficient and things like that. So I want to give credit where credit is due.
Sure.
Much of that was probably natural.
Yeah.
But were there any new skills that had to be taught to your employees to step into that new work?
For sure. A lot of it too is the way we train skills is not necessarily, hey, we're just going to take time away from projects and we're going to learn this skill. It's like a separate boot camp, but instead we use skills that are needed as they arise in projects and then teach to them. And to give actually a counterexample to what I just said, Jordan, one of our director of operations, a member of our management team, created this great tradition. We do it every Friday. It's called Huddle. And so Friday mornings when everyone comes in before we get started for work, everyone on the team takes a turn standing up and sharing two things, something great that happened this past week and something they're looking forward to this weekend. And it seems simple, but there's a lot of great benefits. One is it just builds camaraderie. It builds ways that people can interact with each other, almost bids, if you will. And so it gives kind of a cohesion to the team, but also it's great public speaking practice. And so think about when you're in the Cox meeting and we have folks on our team that are leading a meeting and kind of speaking out in front of others. The skills, although we didn't do Huddle so that our folks could do the Cox meeting.
Which is kind of a natural outcome.
And so there's a lot of things like that we try to orchestrate that provide kind of uplifting general applicable skills. And then also specific things too. So as a project comes up and maybe someone needs to know how to do A or B, we'll teach it to them as they're going. And that on-the-fly kind of training method we find is way more effective in having that skill stick because you have a specific reason where you see prior to learning the skill, it was more cumbersome, it was more difficult, et cetera, to be able to complete a task. And then once you learn the skill, the light bulb comes on of, I can do this way more efficiently, effectively, et cetera. And so your ability to retain that skill is way higher. So we find teaching the skills, they come up to be a really effective method.
When you're linking it to relevancy and real lived experience. That's pedagogy 101.
Yeah, there you go.
Former teacher. I love it. So, okay, I'm going to pause this for a minute because there's so much goodness and there's a lot of thoughtfulness that's gone into this. And I'd like to acknowledge that we have listeners who own a coffee shop or are starting a bakery or an ice cream shop. This is a very different type of service that you guys do, and a needed one, just as coffee shops are needed. Just like the coffee shops and bakeries, right? We need wonderful places to dine. You brought us cookies in the office today, and it brightened our day. So we need all of it. I always look for transferable concepts and skills. So if someone's listening to this and they're wondering if they should keep listening because this model sounds a little bit different than what they're working with.
Sure.
I'd like to answer the question why. Why did you all
Mm.
chose to go so specific? Does this rule in, rule out certain employees when you're thinking about hiring?
Mm-hmm.
And what are the benefits?
So why this matters is most people, also prior, shout out to the people doing different models too, because we're just one solution. This is a massive gap, and you need a ton of hands building this bridge to connect that gap. And so we are by far not going to be able to do this all on our own. And so nor is all the cookie shops or all the bakeries, et cetera, which are all great different models. And so having these together creates this constellation of sorts of how we can bridge it. So no is less or more important. Why a story like us can be helpful for people trying to build something, even if it's not related to professional services, is I think you can learn a couple different aspects from us. Perhaps most importantly is that you need to have clarity and specificity with what you're doing. So it doesn't need to be professional services, doesn't need to be baking cookies, doesn't need to be car washes, doesn't need to be arts and crafts, can be any number of things. But it is really challenging to make something succeed, but it's very doable at the same time. You just need to make sure you have clarity. And so I think it's harder for someone to give someone a list or a recipe for success, but I think you can give them really clearly a recipe for not succeeding. And it's trying to do too many things at once. And so for us, the way that works is we can't hire everyone that wants to work for Ventures ATL because the skill set doesn't align. We'd love to, but we just can't, because you can't have a model that is accommodating for everyone within the neurodiverse community that's looking for a job. We would love to do it, but it's a pretty wide spectrum. Yeah. And so we have to kind of self-narrow to a certain aspect. Doesn't mean this is the perfect group of people that can do work. It doesn't mean we're right in how we calibrate that narrowness, but you need some sort of specificity in what you're doing in order to stand out. And the clarity is really important, because when you're building something, there's a ton of noise out in the community. There's let's take cookies, for example. There's a ton of different cookie shops. Or for our case, there's a ton of different people that provide professional services. Why should someone give you the time of day to listen to what you have to say? Regardless if you have a great mission, great value, et cetera, there's just so much noise out there. And so you need to figure out a way, you in general, third person you, needs to figure out ways that you can rise above the crowd and stick out. And one of the best ways to do that is to be excellent at what you do, or to have a really inspiring and compelling story. And having compelling stories, excellence in what you do, is much easier to build that if you have specificity in what you're trying to do. It doesn't mean you have to do something really small for one person. What you're doing could apply to 1 million people, but you need to have a specificity about what you do. It also doesn't mean that you can't do multiple things. For example, we have a portfolio of different businesses that we run. The predominant one is data management. We also do product fulfillment. We also have a handbag line that was a big part of our founding story.
Some people may know it. You can look them up online.
Yeah. And so we have a variety of things that we do, but we have very strong intention for why we do each one. And I think Ventures ATL could be a story of inspiration for people, regardless of how you're trying to address this, by just doing so with intention.
That gives us a lot of good, I think, transferable information, no matter where you are, what industry you're in. Be mindful, be specific. I heard you say in the beginning, you didn't take every client.
Right.
And that's hard, especially when you're getting started. I can imagine the temptation. Something else I wanted to pull out is y'all are a nonprofit.
We are.
So talk to our listeners about that, because there's, again, no right or wrong, but there are different reasons to make the choice: for-profit, nonprofit. Sometimes there's even a blend. So
we are currently organized as a nonprofit. We might not always be. So in other words, we're not married to always being a nonprofit. It was really helpful when we were getting started, because particularly for us as a professional services firm, we don't have something kind of small or easy that we can just sell right away. A lot of the things that we're selling require trust, relationships, et cetera, which are not things that you can just manufacture out of thin air. You have to earn those things. So there's a lead time for us to get that first dollar coming in the door in terms of revenue. And so we organized ourselves initially as a nonprofit in order to basically seed our runway. And so we had donations from our board that helped us kind of get off the ground, that we've paid back rather quickly. But it was really helpful to get off the ground. And the handbags actually were another huge aspect of that. So one of our board members, Bob, has a really strong relationship with a handbag company, and we partnered with them and basically buy an autism awareness brand of handbags that we co-designed, and we buy them wholesale and then sell them retail on our website. And it's still an aspect of Ventures ATL, is a very integral aspect when we're getting started, because it provided us something that we could sell. So another example too for people that they could take away is needing to be creative as you get off the ground. There's a funny story I love from the Airbnb founders, where before Airbnb was what it was today, and they're trying to get off the ground, they sold cereal.
No way.
Yeah. It was during a presidential campaign.
I think I did hear this
2016 or
story.
2012.
Okay, tell the audience.
I'm not going to do it justice, but Brian Chesky and his co-founder, which I'm blanking on the name, apologies, co-founder, but they were trying to get Airbnb off the ground and were just kind of struggling to get traction, essentially.
Yeah.
And they just needed runway to be able to continue building. They felt convicted about what they're doing. They just needed money in the door to be able to last until they had that flywheel catch. And so they made a couple different brands of cereal that were themed off of a presidential election. The point is they had a creative thing. You don't think of Airbnb as a cereal company, and they don't make cereal now. That's okay. But they did things, and this is a huge underlying point. They did things that didn't scale in the beginning to get to a point where they couldn't do the things that scale. So a lot of times I think people face when they're building a company, or an organization of any sort, there's almost an ego or a pride of, we just do this one thing and I can't do anything outside of that. And that might be true once you get to that point.
We did hear you say at the beginning, find
the focus, right?
Find your focus. So
exactly.
You're staying true to that, but in the beginning, you're also acknowledging that there might be a time when
you have to do things that don't scale. Exactly.
You want to keep the lights on.
Yeah. So, and also there's no perfect prescription for how to do this successfully.
Sure.
So I think having a firm conviction with a loose grasp is a really good way to think about it.
Yeah.
But as you're getting there, you're not there yet. You're not at this successful, everything's just turning really easily point. So to get there, oftentimes I think people have too much pride, quote unquote, to do things that seem a little quirky or might be not worth their time. And they probably aren't worth their time once they get to a point where they're successful. Yeah. Brian Chesky is not going to be making cereal now. It's not a good use of his time. But when they were trying to scrap and get it off the ground, it was a great use, or it was a creative use of their time that ended up working out.
Yeah. So to transfer this back to some of our listeners who might be a parent or a former teacher or an advocate who is just starting out with their social venture, for-profit, nonprofit, we'll leave it kind of open there. I hear a lot of stories of people who just start baking in their own basement with a handful of 5.
Fantastic.
That's not scalable. You can't sell cookies across the nation out of your basement forever.
Right.
But it makes sense at the moment just to see, hey, do cookies even taste good? Does anyone even want to buy them? You have to validate it.
Sure.
And that's a good, easy way to validate it without going all out, buying this huge industrial kitchen, going all out, hiring all these people, and then, oh, shoot, our recipe is bad.
Right.
So,
in fact, I would encourage them to do that. Not go out and buy. Yeah, test it first. If you can test your idea for as cheap as possible, almost make it a game with yourself of how low cost, how low effort can I get an answer on, is this something that has wheels? And that means it's going to be, probably won't be perfect, but what is the least amount of effort and money that you can put into something to test it? Oftentimes I think we need to be so perfect in everything we do to create before we see, is this good or not? Not usually a good use of time or resources.
Did you know there are nearly 200 small businesses in the U.S. who are on a mission to employ individuals with disabilities, and we want to send shoppers their way? That's where you come in. Join the In Good Company passport game and support businesses that are moving the needle for disability employment. Here's how you play. Choose 3 businesses featured on our passport, snap photos with each visit or online purchase, and share them on your Instagram. Tag IGC with us and the business you supported, and we'll send you a prize. Grab your passport and instructions in the show notes or on our Instagram page today.
So when did you guys make the switch and move from, okay, we're doing creative things just to get going, to, okay, now let's get specific?
So I think that the drive to be creative and how you kind of do things that don't scale never leaves, or at least from our experience, it hasn't left us yet. It just changes. So we still sell handbags. We love our collection. We love our customers that do it, but it's not something that we strongly promote now because the area for growth for Ventures ATL in the future is largely data-centric, data management, computer-based type skills. Handbags, again, are something we're really proud of. It's just not something that's going to help us scale from 20 employees to 200 employees. And so the way that we get creative is different. Like right now, for instance, we're thinking about how we can extend our pipeline in terms of incoming potential clients, doing unique things on social media, or creating different pieces of content, or finding creative ways to go out and meet people has been a way that we kind of outlet that creativity. To answer your question more specifically, though, we transitioned away from focusing predominantly on handbags once we had a couple clients under our belt. Once we had a couple case studies, we had a track record basically of people that we could point to and say, hey, we did this work with this person. They have a great story to tell about it. And we had some legs to stand on. As it might translate to cookies or other aspects that someone might be making, trying to create an organization, maybe you have a bunch of cookies that you sell to your neighborhood, or maybe you go to that first market or that first bake sale or that first something, and you sell out. Okay, maybe now it might be worth going to a shared kitchen space, a commissary kitchen, and renting an oven. And then once you get to that point, you have increased volume, and then you sell out again. Okay, now it might be is it worth renting a space and then buying our own oven and maybe hiring on some people that have been kind of testing this out. Maybe I hire them on full time or more in a structured way. So there's basically almost levels to it. Think of it almost like a game in a way where can I pass the barrier to beat this level? If so, great. If not, that's okay. There's just like in a video, I don't know for audience how many people play video games, but oftentimes, most times even, you don't beat a level the first time you try it. So I don't think people should get discouraged that, I tried this and I failed. Most people fail most of the time. All it takes is one success to beat that level. And then you go to the next level and you're going to fail again. And that's fine. And I think a misconception is big successes, the companies we all know of, were almost always not well thought out prior. They had conviction for something, but they almost all started as a small niche that someone said, hey, this kind of subset of people have this issue and they can solve it. And then it expanded from there. And oftentimes I think people get discouraged because I don't know if I can have this all planned out. I envision this, but I don't know how to get there. I'm just not going to start. That's fine. Have something really small and start, then you have momentum. The first, putting it back to cookies, since we use that as an analogy a lot, the hardest cookie to bake is the first cookie to bake. You don't have to figure everything out. Just have conviction on one thing and make momentum on that one thing. And then you never know how that's going to expand.
I think also there's a lot to be said about the people that you bring on board. You mentioned in the very beginning, you didn't have a personal connection to the disability community, but your co-founders, Chet and Sarah, did. And as they were forming their team, they saw skills in you that they believed would complement their mission and help them develop it further. You'll have a board. So the pressure is not all on one person. And that's a burden that a founder can feel a lot.
It can be very lonely being someone in a leadership position, much less a founder.
So how do you identify what you need or maybe what you're lacking? And then how do you go out and find that support?
How we found them was largely relational. So you just have like a friend of a friend or a connection of a connection. And then how you find them, or what you look for rather. Oftentimes I think it's pretty clear if we take 10 minutes, 30 minutes of self-reflection, like kind of each on our own, and think, okay, what do I feel comfortable and confident in and what do I not? I feel like we can pretty clearly get a good list of things. And as you do more, let's say you're starting this brand new thing, and you might not know everything that you need to know or don't know. Once you get started, you'll pretty quickly see, okay, I have no idea this. I'm pretty good at this.
That didn't go so well.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think if we're just honest with ourselves and we take time to just pause and reflect, those things become fairly clear. And then you can start. It doesn't mean you can necessarily find someone that can help with that right away. But I think knowing what you're looking for is more than half of the challenge there. And oftentimes too, I feel this in myself especially. There's a desire some people have that they just want to do it on their own, and or they don't want to inconvenience someone by asking for help.
That's a big one.
It's one of the worst things you can do as someone in the leadership position in general, particularly as a founder. Because starting a business, starting an organization is really challenging. And doing so is also really inspiring. And I think it almost endears you to people to want to help birth this thing, to create this thing, particularly if you have a good mission as well. If you have a meaningful mission, doesn't mean if you just kind of have I'm just doing this to make money, that's a separate story. Doesn't mean you're going to be disadvantaged, but I think you're particularly advantaged if you have a mission behind it. And so if you share what you're building with other people, people do their thing and they'll connect you. It might not be overnight. Sometimes it might be. Maybe it's 6 months down the road. But eventually, if you keep sharing what you're trying to build and what you need help with, that will get to the right ears.
Absolutely.
And people will connect you.
Yeah, I've had that experience.
Yeah.
I would also add something that I was reminded of even last week. Being specific in what you need and what your ask is can be helpful. And an example of that is we're looking to raise more funds right now. It'd be one thing to just say, hey, this guy is in VC world. Like, maybe I could talk to him. Like, hey, Jacob, I'm Sarah. I'm starting this company. Can we have a coffee chat? That's pretty vague. Maybe he latches on to the mission. Maybe he's just a great guy who's willing to have a chat. But instead to say, hey, I understand that you work in the VC space. I've created a pitch deck that could use some review. Could you review it and give me feedback on these 3 things? Sometimes I found that's a little bit more helpful when we as founders can be a little bit more clear on a problem we're trying to solve, like in one specific corner of the business, it helps other people help us more directly.
And I think people underestimate how much other people on average like to help others.
Yeah.
To your point, if you can provide them a softball of like, hey, I need help, here's how you can help me, especially if it aligns with something they're capable of, more often than not, I think your percentage chance of getting kind of a response or the help that you're looking for, or them connecting you to someone that can, goes way up. So that specificity, to your point, can be really helpful.
Agreed. I've also just found great support in the parent community. It may not be someone who's passionate about building an interability employment solution, but they're in finance, but they have a family member with a disability. Ask for help. If you get an unpleasant response, shake it off. Ask again. That happens too. You can't be afraid. But I'm more surprised than not by the people that say, I'd be happy to help.
Sure. And this might be helpful just in the sense of an audience that sounds like some people at least might be thinking of building something. A helpful frame of mind. I found there's a guy named Alex Ramosi I like a lot that has some good kind of nuggets of wisdom. And one of his ways to deal with rejection is the first time is really tough. Rejection is not easy for anyone. But if you can imagine what it would feel like the 1,000th time you've gotten rejected and then just fast forward to that feeling and apply it now, can be super helpful. And it might sound daunting, rejected 1,000 times, that sounds terrible. But if you take a second to think about it, you realize, okay, if I haven't been rejected 1,000 times, the sting of that rejection is likely to be significantly less than this first time that I'm experiencing now. And so I'm probably, if I keep at this thing I want to do, going to be rejected close to that, if not significantly more over time. And my feeling towards that rejection is probably going to be a lot less. I'm going to have thicker skin. I'm not going to mind it as much because I have conviction in what I'm doing. And that no is just one step closer to a yes, right? So if you can fast forward to have that perspective now, I think it's a lot more energizing to deal with that rejection early on.
Wise words.
Yeah, shout out to Alex Ramosi. He's got some good nuggets.
Jacob, we are coming to the end of our time. This has gone really quickly. There are so many ways to approach solutions to this challenge. And Ventures ATL is a great example of refining how you go about it, being specific with who you choose to work with, also being specific with who you choose to hire and why, and the infrastructure that you're building in your workplace to support those employees meaningfully. The fun question that I always like to ask at the end is, who's a business out there that's addressing this challenge, maybe in a similar way, maybe in a different way, but who are you a fan of?
Rising Tide in Florida is one. I think that's doing some great stuff. There's a ton. We just met with Wonderfully Made in Buckhead that makes cookies too.
I didn't even think about that when I brought up the cookies.
Great shop there. Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. Those are two that come to mind initially. Yeah. I mean, to be honest, everyone that's doing something here, I strive to be a fan of just because it's like, well done. There's a need and you're seeing that need and meeting it and kind of raising your hand, rolling up your sleeves and doing something about it. Bravo. Those are two in particular that either kind of a close relationship and or have already done it, kind of a pioneer in the space and are doing some great things. So, and also too, interestingly, like a more recently started one, Wonderfully Made, and a more established one, Rising Tide.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think you can be inspirational in doing great things regardless of your size, regardless of the age of the organization. Just simply doing something about an issue you see in the world or something that you want to change in society, I think deserves to be applauded.
I agree. Well, speaking of people doing great work, we've already shared the Ventures ATL story. We've not yet told the audience about your podcast. Can you tell our audience where they can find you guys and kind of what your podcast is about?
Yeah, so we have a podcast we just started called Spectrum Spotlight, and we're really excited, kind of starting it not too dissimilar from y'all, which is great in terms of timing.
We can share notes later.
On how to be the best podcast. Yeah, and if you have ideas for us, please let us know.
Yes, please do.
But we're really excited about this because we want our employees to be the driving force of it too. So we're going to talk largely and mostly about the work we do, how we help our clients, the skills our employees have, case studies, if you will, stories and kind of, funny little nuances of the engagements themselves. But also we're going to have some adjacent conversations that are related to workplace life and life in general. And almost all of it is going to be driven by our team. And so we have a team of 20 employees right now on the spectrum, growing, and we want to be, 50, 100, 200, drastically bigger. And so as we increase the size of our organization, we think the surface area of the topics we can cover and share from people that are on the front line, so to speak, of doing this and leading an independent life and working and making a difference, not only for the clients that they're working with, but in the community as well, will be our hope, inspirational, and a great jump off point for other people to say, hey, I can see myself in that. I can do that too. And or maybe there's a tip or trick that will help them take that next step in their life, in their career, et cetera. So we're super excited. We're just an episode in, but we're excited for the future of it.
Well, I'm excited to give it a listen. And you guys are living out a value that I think is so important. And that is, it's one thing to talk about the disability community. It's another thing to talk with them and hear from them.
Sure.
So I am so excited to give it a listen. And where can we find it?
Yeah.
Spotify, Apple,
YouTube, all the spots. Yeah.
Okay. And finally, Jacob, you guys are graciously offering a discount.
Yeah.
Can you please tell us about how we can access that?
Absolutely. So this might not apply to everyone, but for potential clients of ours that mention In Good Company, we're going to give a 10% discount on an entire project. And then for people that refer us to a potential client that ends up actually becoming a client, we're going to offer a $1,000 referral bonus.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, we're excited. And it's all in the spirit of growing Ventures ATL too, because the more people that we can bring on as clients, the more companies that is we can bring on as clients, greater capacity we have to hire more folks, talented folks on the spectrum, et cetera.
And how does this help you? So if we're not one of those businesses, but we might have friends who work in these businesses or relatives, what is your ideal client right now? Like what kind of business?
Sure.
Any specifics that might be helpful?
Glad you asked, and it's a great question.
Yeah.
A lot of the work that we do is data centric. So it could be as simple as data entry. It could be much more complex as well, all the way up to, we have a project we're starting next week in the AI space. We're helping a company train and develop their models.
Yeah.
Also, more generally speaking, any sort of process that is tedious but needs to be done well within a business. So it doesn't necessarily need to be data, but for people that aren't necessarily in the business space, but maybe have a connection, family member, friend, et cetera, that is in any sort of business that has like operations or kind of like day-to-day business stuff, might not be a good fit, but it potentially could be. And we found some of our best clients in terms of size and scope and kind of just general success level have often started from someone connecting us like, hey, I think you should talk to such and such. There could be something there. Sometimes no, but oftentimes yes. And there's this amazing engagement where we can provide a ton of value to the client. And then also the obvious benefit of us being able to hire adults on the spectrum is the flip side.
The more clients, the more hires you'll need to make.
Exactly.
Well, let's get you some more clients.
Would love it.
All right. Well, I will put your contact information in the show notes so that they know where to reach out.
Cool.
Jacob, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
We consider you in good company.
I appreciate it.
We've been happy to be in your company today. Thank
Amazing.
you.
Thanks for joining us on In Good Company. I hope this conversation gave you what you needed to take your next step. Special thanks to Georgia Tech's Institute for Leadership and Social Impact for the recording space and the coffee. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, share, or leave a review to help more leaders like you find us. Want more tools, frameworks, or a community of like-minded advocates? Head over to igcwithus.com to learn more. We'd love to connect. Until next time, keep building what wasn't there before. You're in good company.